Hello folks, how are you? This is Azzeddin Hawam, the founder of SADAA-Echoes. Today we are with my friend Monique. Welcome Monique. Today's episode is a special one. We titled it Spices and Stories, a journey of memory, culture and connection. Today we're gonna look at spices in general, but maybe focus on one spice in particular and talk about that spice and its connection to our homes, culture, and stories. Every spice carries a story. The scent, the flavors, the recipes passed through generation hold memories of home, family, and community. And so, through sharing of stories and spices, we remember our kitchens, our grandmothers, our family, and our traditions. So, welcome, Monique.
Thank you.
We are happy to be with you today.
Happy
First,
to be here.
tell us a little bit about who you are and why do you love spice?
Well, I am a teacher. I was originally a biology teacher, so that's one of the reasons I love spices, because I'm just a bit of a science nerd and I love learning about how spices, affect the body. I'm also a mom, and so I do a lot of cooking and a lot of playing doctor in the house, and spices are part of that for me as well.
Well, that's great, and thank you for being with us again, and welcome to our Unbounded Stories series with SADAA-Echoes. Could you tell us a little bit about the spice you have today, its significance to you, to your culture, and why you chose it?
So I chose to talk about this little spice here. It's called Jamaican pimento, also known as allspice. And I chose to talk about it today because what I really enjoy about this spice is that it represents so many different people in so many periods of time. And so it really has not just a story about a particular group or a particular era, but a story that really spans generations and various people.
And what are those stories, if you can share one of them?
Yeah, so for sure. So this spice is native to Jamaica, and it comes from a berry, and that berry is dried, and that's what you have here. It looks a little bit like a peppercorn, and it's kind of used similarly to a peppercorn, to be honest. So this was originally used by the indigenous Taino people of the Caribbean, and they used it primarily to preserve meat. And it was adopted later by people of African ancestry when African slaves ran into the mountains to escape slavery. They had to figure out a way of cooking, and so one of the things that they did was they cooked underground so that there wouldn't be smoke to detect, British soldiers, to let them know where their whereabouts were. So they developed the popular method of jerk in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, and that is where they built a pit in the ground, filled it with the leaves of this plant and the wood, and they cooked underground with it. They also used the berries, crushed them, and used them to flavor the meat as well. And it was significant because it was part of the story of resistance and running away into the mountains and being able to cook without being detected. But it's also significant because they learned from the Taino people about the properties of pimento and how it could be used to preserve meat. And so how you could survive longer with this meat after you've cooked it.
Wow, what a wonderful, powerful story. It brings me to the Palestinian meal of zerb, which also is cooked underground in a hole, in a pit. And of course, it gets covered with lots of soil. And we usually cook chicken and vegetables and so on. And it's really tasty. But I just started thinking about, were there any similarities in our history of how people got to that meal and the way they cooked it underground? So, Monique, when you think of these spices, and particularly the spice you just talked about, what stories of your home, your childhood, your family come to mind?
Well, I think about in my own home, I use this and I make jerk marinade. It's a key ingredient in the marinade that goes on jerk chicken and pork. But I also think about my family and my aunties cooking in the kitchen, singing and laughing. It's in those moments where I would hear sort of like those more traditional folk songs that you don't really hear now. Having grown up in Canada, I don't have as much exposure to that. So when I think of the spice, I think about that. I think about the fragrance. It's very fragrant when you cook with it. You can pick it out, and the flavor is very distinct. And so it reminds me of particular meals that my grandmother would make, or that my aunties and my mom would make. One thing that does remind me of very much is Christmas time, actually, because pimento is one of the key spices in a drink that we make in the Caribbean at Christmas time called sorrel, which is made from hibiscus flowers, and they put spices like ginger and cinnamon and pimento in there, and you can always tell which auntie uses less or more pimento in their sarl, and I really liked the flavor of it, so it reminds me of that.
That's beautiful. And I know recently you returned back from Jamaica, while you were visiting your family. Was there a story or a meal or something you cooked with your family there, or you had with your family, that this spice was used?
Yeah, we made some fried fish, and usually on the condiments that go on top of the fish, there's pimento seeds in there. It's also used in like a lot of stews, so it was probably in like everything that I ate,
Okay.
to be honest. We had stew peas, and it was in there. It was in the soups that we made. Lots
So
of
it's
things.
in everything.
Yeah,
pretty
pretty
much.
much.
And you have another thing here. What is that?
So here I brought some cinnamon from Jamaica, some nutmeg, and some cloves. And I brought these three things because that is why allspice is called allspice, because it kind of gives the flavor and the scent of those three things. So when the Europeans found out about allspice, they were like, hey, this is like a 3-for-1 deal, you know. Spices were becoming more popular in Europe in the 16th and 17th century, and so allspice became a hot commodity because it had all of those flavors kind of in one bite. And at one point it was actually called black gold because the price of it was so coveted in Europe.
Very beautiful.
And it got incorporated into European cuisine. You can find it in some things like sausages and other cured meats.
Very cool. Yeah, but I come from similar backgrounds. We have a very old Turkish market back home, and it's filled with spice shops. And every time you go to that particular market, you could smell not just the multi smells, but I think you could almost feel and touch history, because it's been there for so long. And I don't know if it's similar in your family, but when you get sick or you're about to, you have a cold, your family, particularly your grandmother, would never send you to the doctor. Of course, they'll go to the market, they'll go to the herb or the spice shop, and they'll find a remedy, 20, 30 spices and herbs all mixed up together, and they'll make you a drink out of that, just so you can feel better. And I think those stories are so essential in telling today, in helping us understand, of course, indigenous experiences, indigenous stories across the globe. So, Monique, you're an educator. You're in schools. You work with educators. How do you bring those stories, the histories you just shared with me, which are so multi-layered, into those spaces? What do you teach them? What do you bring into those spaces?
So when I taught biology, one of the things that I would do, I love herbalism in general, is I would use herbalism to talk about the effects of these herbs on the body. So connect it to anatomy and physiology, connect it to things like cellular regeneration, and so on. But in my current context, teaching anti-racism, I think that you could use spices and herbs to, tell the stories of different people and how those spices, carried across lands, and how it involves things like trade and oppression. Even there's a lot of history of oppression tied to spices. There were entire places like in Indonesia where 30,000 people were slaughtered over one spice. So I think we can use spices to talk about history, about justice, about colonization, about oppression, but we can also use it to talk about hope. There's also in every culture different stories of spices and how they heal or how they uplift your spirit and different things like that. One memory that comes to mind for me is I was in Jamaica, and as a kid, and we were walking through some bushes, and I cut my leg on the side of a bush, and it was just gashing, and my grand uncle came over. There was pimento nearby because we were near home, and they usually, they might be planted sort of on the side of the house kind of thing. And so he grabbed some of the fresh pimento berries, crushed it up on a leaf, and stuck it on my leg, and then wrapped it up. And by the time we got back to where we were going, by the time we got back there, I could already see the wound starting to close up, and that thing healed like super quickly. And so I'm reminded of that when I look at pimento berries. I'm also reminded of how my grandmother would put these in alcohol with some other herbs and spices, and then when you were sick, she would like rub that on your chest and kind of use it as like a vapor rub.
That's beautiful, truly beautiful. And I know there are many examples around the globe of how colonizations and colonial powers didn't allow indigenous people to continue caring and cultivating herbs that were indigenous to their communities and to their lands, as a way of taking away their spirit, and as a way of making sure slowly to erase their identities. So when you talk about hope and the fact that many communities globally still use herbs for generations now, I think that act of reclamation and of resistance is something that is so profoundly beautiful. On the last note here, Monique, if spices could speak today, and they often speak through smells and through other things, what could they tell us?
I think that they would tell us that, you know, that they're symbols of resistance, that they've stood the test of time and have been used for millennia by various different people and in various different ways. I think that they would tell us that they unite us. You know, we can all think of a spice that was traded even between our cultures, which are, you know, very different and very far apart, but I'm sure that we could come up with something. And I think that they would tell us to remember them and remember how they represent our connection to the land and how we can use them to heal our mind, body, and spirit.
Thank you so much, Monique.
The last thing,
just thinking about it now, the last thing I want to ask is, if there are people, young people particularly, trying to relearn about their cultures through spices, where would be a good place to start?
Well, you know, there's lots of fast information on TikTok, but also do your research. There's numerous books. I purchased a book recently that was completely about Jamaican herbalism, and so I dived into that. And then as I, you know, do visits out to the Caribbean, I try to then learn about it in that particular context. So always go try to see it if you can, but also just really enjoy it. Like, enjoy trying these different flavors, putting them in random things. I made cheesecake yesterday, and I put a little pimento in the crust, and people were like, "What is that little je ne sais quoi?" You know, like they were like, "What is that little bite of something in there?" And I, you know, kind of chuckled to myself. It was some pimento and it was some cardamom as well.
Okay.
Yeah, in cheesecake crust. So, you know, have fun with it.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Monique. And folks, as a founder of SADAA-Echoes, I can tell you that I come from small kitchens where nothing is labeled. My grandmother and my mother have everything in their kitchens unmarked. It's somewhere in the cupboards, and they would tell you, go find me the saffron, or go find me the sage, and just smell it. And the smell is the guidance, the smell is the instructions that you need to find something. And this is how they cook as well. They don't cook by using a recipe. They cook by looking and smelling, and you know, just making sure that there is enough for everybody who comes through the house. And so today's invitation to all of us, folks, is to find people who are reclaiming these stories, to stand with them in solidarity and love, and most importantly, to keep sharing those stories of your ancestors in a good, beautiful way. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Monique.
Thank you.
Shukran for being with us. Follow us at SADAA.Echoes and be part of the story.